Mark stared at the blinking cursor on his phone, the glow of the screen cutting through the darkness of the kitchen. His thumb hovered for a heartbeat longer than he cared to admit. Then, with a tremor that felt like a small earthquake, he hit send. "We need to talk. I've done something terrible. I am sorry. Can we meet tonight?" The words felt thin, like paper-thin apologies, and as soon as they left his fingers, the silence in the room swelled louder than any argument ever could. He could hear the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, each sound a reminder that the world kept moving while his life had just cracked open. Laura, his wife of 12 years, was at work when the message arrived. By the time she got home, the house smelled of fresh coffee and cheap perfume. Her own scent, but now it seemed foreign. She found Mark's phone on the kitchen counter, the screen still lit with her own name. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. She read the text, then the longer, clumsy email he'd drafted and never sent. The words, "I cheated," stared back at her like a scar. "Why?" she whispered, voice cracking. The question hung between them, heavy as a stone. Mark swallowed, his throat raw. "I don't know," he managed. "I was stupid. I was looking for something I didn't have." He could see the hurt flare in her eyes, a mix of betrayal, disbelief, and a painful, familiar love that refused to simply turn off. The next days were a blur of apologies, tears, and the frantic beating of his heart every time Laura glanced at him. He could feel the weight of his own guilt pressing down on his chest, a black cloud that followed him everywhere, into the grocery store, into the shower, into the quiet moments when he was alone with his thoughts. Every time Mark passed the downtown coffee shop where he and Laura had their first date, the memory of that bright, hopeful morning was instantly eclipsed by the image of the hotel room where he'd hidden his secret. The song they both loved, playing on the radio, sparked a flash of their first dance, and then a flash of the night he'd taken a different hand to hold. He started catching himself in the mirror, watching his own eyes for signs of the man he'd become. "You're still a liar," the inner voice hissed. "You'll never be the same." The shame gnawed at him, a relentless whisper that turned even ordinary moments into trials. He tried to drown the thoughts with work, with the gym, with the endless scroll of social media, but the shadow persisted. He could feel it now and then, a sudden tightening in his chest when a friend mentioned cheating in a joke, or when he saw a couple holding hands on a park bench. The past was a phantom limb. He couldn't see it, but he could feel its ache. Desperate for help, Mark booked an appointment with Dr. Larkin, a therapist who specialized in shame and infidelity. The first session felt like stepping into a cold shower. Shame is a signal that something in our values has been violated, Dr. Larkin said. It can either imprison us or guide us toward change. What would you like to do with it? Mark confessed his fear that he would forever be the other man in his own life. Dr. Larkin gave him a simple assignment, a daily journal titled Shame Log. Each entry required him to note the trigger, the intensity of the shame, on a scale of 1 to 10, and how he responded, whether he sank deeper or chose a healthier action. The first entries were raw. Saw a couple kissing. 8 out of 10 felt like a punch. I wrote about it instead of scrolling through memes. Over weeks, the log became a mirror, reflecting not just his pain, but his growing capacity to sit with it without self-destruction. Mark also knew words alone wouldn't rebuild trust. He offered Laura unrestricted access to his phone, email, and bank accounts, not as a punitive measure, but as a promise of openness. He suggested weekly trust check-ins, a set time where they could discuss fears, doubts, and progress without judgment. Laura was hesitant, her eyes flickering between hurt and cautious hope. "It's terrifying to open that door again," she said, "but I need to know you're not hiding anything." The first check-in was awkward. Mark stumbled over explanations, Laura asked pointed questions, and both left the room with tears. Yet each subsequent meeting grew a little smoother. The act of sharing, of laying his digital life on the table, created a new, fragile scaffolding for their relationship. Reading Kristen Neff's Self-Compassion changed Mark's inner dialogue. He learned to replace the relentless, "you're a monster," with a gentler, "I made a terrible mistake, but I'm capable of learning." Every night before bed, he repeated a mantra: "I deserve forgiveness because I'm working to become a better person." The mantra didn't erase his guilt, but it prevented it from spiraling into self-destruction. It gave him permission to be human, to stumble, and still keep moving forward. Mark began asking himself deeper questions. Who am I beyond this betrayal? What values do I want my family to embody? How can I show up as a partner who honors trust? He wrote a list of core values: honesty, respect, presence, gratitude. Each week, he chose one to practice deliberately. He started cooking Sunday breakfast for Laura, not because he wanted a grand gesture, but because it was a concrete way to show care. He listened, truly listened, when Laura talked about her day, without trying to fix or defend. 2 years later, Mark and Laura still have trust check-ins, but they're less about proving fidelity and more about sharing dreams. They've taken a small road trip to the coast, a place where they once celebrated an anniversary. While they sit on the sand watching the sunset, Mark feels a familiar knot in his stomach, but it's not the same knot of shame. It's a reminder of the work he's done. "I still get scared sometimes," Laura says, her voice soft. "It's like a tiny alarm that goes off, but I know we've built something stronger than before." "I hear it, and I'm grateful you're still here," Mark replies. "I'm not the same person I was, and I don't expect perfection. I just want to keep learning." The shadow hasn't vanished. It lingers, a faint outline that appears when the wind changes. But now it sits beside a light Mark has cultivated, a light of accountability, humility, and ongoing effort. The journey is unending, but it is no longer a prison. It is a path. Months slipped into years, and the rhythm of Mark and Lara's life settled into a pattern that felt, at last, like a fragile but steady heartbeat. Their evenings were still punctuated by the quiet ritual of checking in. Sometimes a brief text, sometimes a lingering conversation over a glass of wine. But the urgency that had once crackled in the air had dulled to a calm, steady glow. One rainy Thursday morning, the phone on the kitchen counter buzzed with a notification that made Mark's stomach tighten for a moment before he remembered the log he kept. It was a message from his sister, Maya, who lived 3 states away. "Hey, I'm pregnant. We're having a girl. I wanted you to hear it from me first." The news hit Mark like a sudden gust of wind. Joy surged, but it collided with a familiar knot of fear. The thought of becoming a father, of being responsible for another life, forced him to confront a question he had kept at the back of his mind since the night he had confessed. Could he ever be a trustworthy partner and a reliable parent? The image of his own child, small and trusting, made the memory of his betrayal flash sharper than ever. He called Laura as soon as he could, his voice trembling just enough that she sensed something was off. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone soft, already braced for another crisis. Maya's having a baby," he said, letting the words hang. "A girl." A smile broke across Lara's face, bright and genuine. "That's wonderful, Mark. Congratulations. We'll have a niece." His chest eased a fraction, but the knot didn't disappear. Over the next few days, as he watched the sun rise from the porch and tried to imagine a future with a niece, a new anxiety rose. What if I repeat the patterns that broke my marriage? He turned the thought over, feeling the familiar sting of shame, but also the steadier presence he had been cultivating. He brought the concern to his next session with Dr. Larkin. "I'm going to be an uncle," he said, and I can't help but think about the kid I'll meet someday. I don't want to be that uncle who's the same as the husband I was." Dr. Larkin nodded, eyes calm. "You're already doing the work that many never start. The fact that you're asking these questions shows you're aware of the risk. The next step is to turn awareness into intentional action." She suggested a concrete experiment. Each week, Mark would write a short letter to his future niece, describing a value he wanted to model: honesty, patience, gratitude. He would read the letter aloud to himself, visualizing the child listening, and then think about one small habit he could adopt that week to embody that value. The exercise was designed to bridge the abstract desire to be better with a tangible daily practice. The first letter was simple. "Dear little one, I want you to know that it's okay to make mistakes, as long as you own them and try to learn from them." He chose to practice punctuality that week, arriving home at the exact time he promised Laura. No excuses. The habit felt small, but each time he set the clock and met the deadline, a quiet pride rose inside him. It was a reminder that trust isn't rebuilt in grand gestures alone. It lives in the minutiae of everyday life. As the months passed, Mark's commitment to these micro-habits grew. He began volunteering at a local community center, teaching a weekend art class for kids. The first time a shy 8-year-old asked him how to blend colors, Mark felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness and patience. He realized that the same patience he was learning to offer Laura was spilling over into his interactions with strangers, especially children. It was a subtle but profound shift. The shadow of his past infidelity was being edged out by a new, forward-looking purpose. Laura noticed a change, too. One night, after dinner, she tucked a folded note into his pillow. "I saw you talking with the kids today. You were patient, kind, and genuinely interested. It made me proud. Thank you for showing me that you're still growing." He read the words, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with guilt and everything to do with connection. The note was a quiet affirmation that the work he was doing mattered, not just to him, but to the people around him. The real test came unexpectedly one summer afternoon. Their niece, Maya's daughter, arrived for a weekend visit, her tiny hand gripping Mark's as they walked through the local park. The little girl, bright-eyed and curious, pointed at a pigeon pecking at the grass and asked, "Uncle Mark, why does he keep stealing food?" Mark knelt to her level, feeling the weight of his own past actions reflected in the simplicity of her question. He thought for a moment, then answered honestly, "Sometimes people, pigeons or humans, do things they know aren't right because they're hungry or afraid. What matters is that we try to do better after we realize it." The girl looked up at him, nodded solemnly, and then giggled, running off to chase a butterfly. Mark watched her go, feeling a strange mixture of humility and hope. He realized that forgiveness, both from others and from oneself, is not a destination, but a continual practice, one that can be modeled for the next generation. Later that evening, as Laura and Mark sat on the back porch with the summer breeze rustling the curtains, Laura reached for his hand. "Do you ever think about the day we first met?" she asked, voice soft. Mark smiled, the memory vivid. "Ido, I remember how nervous I was, how you laughed at my terrible jokes. I remember thinking I'd never mess that up." She squeezed his hand. "You've messed up, but you've also worked hard to fix it. I'm proud of you for that. And I'm proud of the man you're becoming, for the little girl today, for the way you're learning to be better." He leaned his head against hers, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing. The shadow that had once loomed over him was still there, a faint outline that reminded him of his missteps, but it no longer dictated his present. It served as a reminder of why he kept choosing honesty, why he kept showing up on time, why he kept listening. In the months that followed, the couple continued to navigate the ordinary challenges of life: bills, work stress, the occasional argument over who left the lights on. Each time, the tools they had built, weekly check-ins, the shame log, the habit experiments, helped them keep the conversation open and the trust slowly, deliberately repaired. 1 year after Maya's announcement, Mark stood at a small ceremony in a park, watching his niece walk down the aisle with her partner. He felt a swell of gratitude, not only for the love that had survived his betrayal, but for the ongoing journey of becoming a man who could, one day, look his own children in the eye and say, "I'm sorry, and I'm working to be better." The road ahead would always have twists, and the shadow would never fully disappear. But Mark now understood that the light he carried, built from accountability, humility, and daily intention, was strong enough to keep the darkness at bay, both for himself and for those he loved. The sun slipped low behind the trees, casting long, amber ribbons across the grass as the ceremony drew to a close. Mark stood among the scattered guests, feeling the gentle press of hands on his shoulders, Lara's firm, reassuring grip, Maya's bright smile, the quiet nod of an old friend who had watched their marriage teeter on the brink years before. The air hummed with the soft chatter of families reuniting, the clink of glasses, the occasional burst of laughter that seemed to stitch the world back together. Mark glanced at Lara. She turned her head, eyes shining with the same steady love that had steadied him through the darkest nights. He could see the lines of the past etched faintly around them, wrinkles that spoke of tears, of arguments, of late-night talks that never seemed to end. Yet those lines also traced the contours of resilience, of a partnership that had been rebuilt brick by brick. He took a breath, feeling the weight of the years lift just a little. In his pocket, the last entry of his shame log lay folded, the ink slightly smudged from the countless times he'd turned it over in his hands. He slipped it out, read the final line he had written months ago. "Forgiveness is not a finish line. It is a road we travel together, one step at a time." The words no longer felt like a promise he was still trying to keep. They felt like a truth he had lived. A soft breeze lifted a stray leaf and sent it twirling across the grass, landing at his feet. He bent, picked it up, and tossed it gently into the air, watching it drift before settling on the ground. In that simple motion, he saw a metaphor for his own journey, caught, lifted, set down, and ultimately finding a place to rest. Lara reached for his hand again, this time squeezing it with a quiet certainty. "Whatever comes next," she said, "we'll meet it together." He smiled, the kind of smile that had been rare in his younger days, now familiar and earned. "Together," he echoed, feeling the words settle like a stone in his chest, solid, grounding. As the last notes of the ceremony's music faded, the crowd began to disperse, families strolling toward their cars, children waving goodbye to their cousins. Mark lingered a moment longer, watching his niece, now a bride, walk down the path with a confident stride, her hand clasped tightly around her partner's. He thought of the letters he had written to her, of the small habits he had cultivated, of the mornings he had shown up on time, of the evenings he had listened without defending. Each of those moments had been a thread, and together they had woven a new tapestry, one that acknowledged the darkness but celebrated the light. He turned to Lara, who was already moving toward the car, her silhouette framed by the setting sun. He walked beside her, the soft thud of his shoes matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. The road ahead would still have potholes, unexpected rainstorms, and moments when a shadow of his past might stretch long across the pavement. But now he carried with him a toolbox of honesty, humility, and daily intention, and a partner who believed in his capacity to keep choosing better. The car doors closed, the engine murmured to life, and they drove away from the park, the lights of the town flickering on one by one. As the night settled, Mark looked out the window at the darkening sky, feeling a quiet certainty settle over him. He whispered, more to himself than to anyone else, "I'm still learning. I'm still forgiving. And that's enough." The night stretched on, and the road ahead stretched farther still. But for the first time in many years, the journey felt less like a punishment and more like a promise, one he was finally ready to keep. He turned the key in the ignition, and the engine's low purr seemed to echo the steady rhythm that had begun to replace the frantic thrum of his earlier years. The streetlights blurred past in a slow procession, each one a tiny lighthouse guiding him forward. The darkness outside was thick, but inside the car the glow of the dashboard bathed his face in a soft, amber light. He could feel the weight of the road ahead. Not just the literal miles that stretched to his sister's house, but the metaphorical distance he still needed to travel within himself. The drive took him through neighborhoods he knew by heart, past houses with white picket fences, through a park where children chased frisbees, past a small library where he once volunteered to read to a group of first graders. Each familiar landmark reminded him of a time when his life felt simpler, when his biggest worry had been whether to bring a snack for the reading hour. Now his concerns were layered, complex, and often tangled with the lingering threads of shame. Yet the familiarity of those places also offered a sense of continuity, a reminder that life moves on, that people change, that the world does not pause for any one crisis. When he pulled into Maya's driveway, the house was already awash in the soft golden light of late afternoon. A swing creaked gently in the backyard, and a small, pink and white banner hung over the front door reading, "Welcome, little one." He could hear the muffled giggle of a toddler from inside, a sound that made his chest tighten and then soften at the same time. He took a deep breath, letting the scent of fresh-cut grass and blooming jasmine fill his lungs. Maya opened the door with a smile that seemed to stretch across the distance of the years since they'd last sat together in a kitchen arguing about whose turn it was to do the dishes. "Hey, Mark," she said, pulling him into a quick, warm hug. "Come in. We're just about to get the baby's room set up. You have to see the paint color." He stepped inside, the house smelling of baby lotion, baby powder, and a faint hint of vanilla candles that Maya liked to keep lit in the evenings. The living room was a mess of boxes, cribs, changing tables, tiny onesies in pastel blues and pinks, a stack of picture books with bright animal illustrations. He felt a pang of awe at the sheer possibility of new life, and at the same time a flicker of fear that the same patterns that had broken his marriage could somehow echo in his future relationships with his niece's child. Maya led him to a small corner where a fresh coat of teal paint glistened on the wall. "I thought we'd go with something calming, but not too boring," she said, gesturing toward a swatch of the color. "What do you think?" He paused, looking at the teal, at the way the light caught the glossy surface, at the way it reminded him of the sea after a storm. Still moving, still deep, still beautiful despite turbulence. "I like it," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "It feels hopeful." She laughed, a sound that felt like a bell. "Well, hopeful it is then." She turned to him, eyes softening. "I'm glad you're here. I missed you." Mark felt a lump rise in his throat. "I missed you too," he whispered. "And I'm sorry I wasn't there earlier. I've been working on a lot of things." She nodded, understanding the subtext without needing a full explanation. "I know, and I'm proud of you for taking those steps. It's not easy." They spent the next hour arranging the nursery, placing tiny stuffed animals on a shelf, hanging a mobile shaped like clouds and stars. As they worked, Mark found himself laughing at Maya's jokes, feeling the ease of a conversation that didn't revolve around betrayal or guilt. It was a different kind of intimacy, a sibling bond, a shared anticipation for a new life that was not his own, but that he could still nurture. When they finally settled on a soft lullaby, playing from a small speaker. Mark felt a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in his chest. The music was gentle, the notes floating like a feather. He closed his eyes and let the melody wash over him, imagining the future, a child's first steps, a birthday cake, a family gathering where he would be present, not as a secret, not as a betrayer, but as a loving uncle, a supportive friend, a steady presence. He left Maya's house later that evening with a small, hand-stitched blanket for the baby tucked under his arm. The night sky was clear, a vast expanse of stars that seemed to pulse with quiet wisdom. As he drove home, he thought about the letter he would write to his future niece that night, a letter that would now include a promise to be there for her child, to model the values he'd been working so hard to embody. He pulled into his driveway, the house illuminated by the soft glow of a porch light. The scent of rain lingered in the air, a reminder that the world continued to cycle through seasons, each one bringing its own challenges and gifts. He stepped inside, hearing Lara's footsteps on the hardwood floor as she came from the bedroom, a towel wrapped around her hair. "Did you have a good evening?" she asked, setting down a bowl of fresh fruit on the kitchen island. "Yeah," he replied, placing the blanket on the counter. "Maya's having a baby. It feels like a new chapter." She smiled, a mixture of joy and curiosity. "That's wonderful. I'm happy for her." He nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. "I want to write her a letter tonight. Something simple, but meaningful." Lara reached out, taking his hand. "I think that's a beautiful idea. And I think you're doing something right for yourself, too." He squeezed her hand, feeling the familiar warmth that had always been his anchor. "I'm trying." They moved to the living room, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background, and Mark opened his journal. He flipped to a fresh page, the crisp paper inviting him to pour his thoughts onto it. He wrote, "Dear little one, I don't know what you'll look like yet, whether you'll have your mother's hair, your aunt's smile, or a spark of your uncle's curiosity. But I do know this. Life can be messy, and sometimes we make choices we regret. I've learned that the most important thing we can do after hurting someone we love is to keep trying, to keep showing up, to keep listening, even when the shame feels heavy. I promise to be there for you, to teach you how to paint colors that make you feel brave, to help you find the perfect book for bedtime, to cheer you on when you learn to ride a bike. I promise to be honest, to ask for help when I need it, and to keep learning how to be a better person every day. If you ever feel scared, remember that you have a family that loves you, and that love is stronger than any mistake we make. With love, Uncle Mark." He read the words aloud, his voice low but steady. The act of speaking them made them feel more real, more anchored in his intention. He closed the journal, feeling a subtle shift in his chest, a lightness he hadn't felt in years. Later that night, after Lara had gone to bed, Mark sat on the balcony, the cool night air brushing against his skin. He could hear the faint rustle of leaves, the distant hum of a car passing by. He thought about the future, about the possibility of becoming a father someday, about the responsibility that would come with it. He imagined holding a newborn, feeling the fragile weight of a life completely dependent on him. He thought of the mistakes he had made, of the shame that still lingered, and of the tools he had built to navigate it. His phone buzzed with a notification from his therapist's online portal, a reminder of his next appointment. He smiled, feeling grateful for the structure Dr. Larkin had given him. He typed a quick reply, confirming the time, then set the phone face down on the balcony railing. The next morning, the sky was a soft gray, the kind of overcast that made the world feel hushed. Mark woke early, the house still quiet, Lara still asleep. He slipped out of bed, padded to the kitchen, and brewed a pot of coffee, the rich aroma filling the air. He poured a cup for himself and one for Lara, then carried both back to the bedroom, setting them gently on the nightstand. Lara stirred, blinking sleep from her eyes. "Morning," she murmured, taking the cup. Morning, he replied, sitting down beside her. For a few moments they sipped in silence, the simple act of sharing coffee a ritual that felt grounding. He opened up his laptop, pulling up the list of values he had written months ago. Honesty, respect, presence, gratitude. He added a new one that had emerged recently. Generosity, generosity of time, of attention, of love. He stared at the list, feeling the weight of each word, the promise embedded within. He decided to create a visual reminder for both of them. He gathered a small corkboard from the closet, a set of colorful push pins, and a stack of index cards. He wrote each value on a card, one per card, and pinned them to the board, arranging them in a circle. He placed the board on the kitchen wall, at eye level, where it would be seen each morning as they prepared breakfast. Lara looked at the board, eyes softening. "I love this," she said. "It's like a compass we can check." He smiled, feeling a surge of hope. "Exactly. And we can add a new one each month if we want." They spent the rest of the day cooking together, the kitchen filled with the clatter of pots, the sizzle of onions, the sweet scent of cinnamon rolling off the oven. They laughed over a misplaced spoon, shared a quiet moment watching the sunset from the back porch, and later, after dinner, they settled on the couch to watch a documentary about marine conservation, a topic they both cared about but had rarely explored together. As the documentary ended, Lara turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "You know, Mark, I've been thinking about something." He looked at her, curious. "What's on your mind?" She took a breath. "I've been wondering, what if we started a small project together? Something that gives back to the community, that helps us stay connected to each other and to others. Maybe a weekly kindness night, where we invite friends over, share a meal, and talk about ways we can help our neighbors. It could be a way to keep building trust, not just between us, but with the world around us." He felt a pulse of excitement. "I love that idea. It would give us a purpose beyond just fixing what happened. It would be about creating something positive." They began to sketch out the details, a potluck-style dinner, a rotating schedule for who would host, a theme each month, environment, mental health, local arts. They decided to start small, inviting a few close friends, and to keep the focus on listening and sharing rather than on grand gestures. In the weeks that followed, the kindness night became a modest but meaningful tradition. The first evening, they invited Maya, her husband, and a couple of neighbors. The table was set with mismatched plates, a bowl of fresh salad, a casserole that Lara had perfected over the years. They talked about community gardens, about the importance of mental health days in schools, about the simple act of checking in with a neighbor who lives alone. Mark found himself opening up more than he had in years, sharing his journey with shame, the tools he was using, the ways he was trying to rebuild trust. He spoke about his shame log, his weekly values board, his letters to his niece. The group listened, nodding, some offering their own stories of vulnerability. He felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of belonging that was not based on perfection, but on shared humanity. One night, after the group had left, Lara turned to him, eyes glistening. "You were brave tonight," she whispered. "I've never seen you talk like that before, not just with me, but with others. It's beautiful." He reached for her hand, feeling the familiar pulse of reassurance. "I'm learning that bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's showing up anyway." Their kindness nights continued, each month bringing new faces, new ideas, new connections. The community garden they helped launch began to sprout tomatoes, basil, and marigolds, a tangible reminder that growth takes patience and care. The mental health workshop they hosted at the local library attracted a group of teenagers who later wrote thank you notes expressing how much it meant to hear an adult speak openly about vulnerability. Mark's shame log evolved as well. The entries grew shorter, Sometimes just a single word. Gratitude, presence, connection. The intensity ratings began to dip. What once had been an 8 out of 10 now often hovered around a 3 or 4. He learned to notice the subtle shifts, the moments when a lingering thought of shame would arise and dissolve before it could take hold. He also began to add a new column, lesson learned. This forced him to extract meaning from each episode, turning pain into growth. One autumn evening, as the leaves turned amber and gold, Mark sat with Dr. Larkin for a session that felt less like a check-in and more like a celebration of progress. The therapist's office smelled faintly of pine, a small vase of eucalyptus on the side, table releasing a calming scent. She looked at him with a warm, approving smile. "Mark," she began, "you've come a long way since our first meeting. You've built systems, you've cultivated habits, you've involved your partner, you've extended generosity outward. How do you feel about where you are now?" He thought for a moment, feeling the words settle. "I feel more at peace with myself. I still have moments where the old shame whispers, but I can hear it, name it, and choose not to let it control me. I feel more connected to Laura, to my family, to the community. I'm not saying the past is gone, but it's become a part of my story, not the whole story." She nodded. "That's an important distinction. The past can be a teacher, not a jailer. What's next for you?" He hesitated, then said, "I think I want to start thinking about parenthood. Not just being an uncle, but maybe someday having my own children. I want to be the kind of father who doesn't repeat the mistakes I made, who can model honesty and vulnerability for his kids." Dr. Larkin leaned forward, eyes bright. "That's a powerful intention. Let's explore what that looks like in concrete steps. We can talk about how you would handle conflict with a partner, how you would talk to a child about mistakes, how you would model self-compassion. It's a continuation of the work you're already doing, just applied to a new role." They spent the next hour mapping out a future parent plan, weekly check-ins with his partner about parenting values, reading books on positive discipline, attending a local father-to-be support group, practicing active listening with children at the community center. Mark left the office feeling both humbled and energized, a sense of purpose blooming like a seed ready to sprout. Back at home, he shared the plan with Laura over a cup of chamomile tea. She listened, her eyebrows rising in thoughtful curiosity. "I love that you're thinking ahead," she said. "I think we could both benefit from a parenting workshop. It would give us tools and a shared language." He smiled, grateful for her openness. "Let's sign up for the one the community center is offering next month. It's called Conscious Parenting." The week after they enrolled, they attended the workshop together. The facilitator, a warm-hearted mother of 3, spoke about the importance of modeling emotional regulation, of admitting mistakes in front of children, of creating a safe space for feelings. The couple practiced role-playing scenarios, how to apologize to a child after raising their voice, how to discuss a broken promise without shame. Mark felt his heart race at first, but as the exercises continued, he found himself loosening, allowing vulnerability to replace the tight knot that had once been his default response. After the workshop, as they walked out into the crisp afternoon air, Laura turned to him, eyes sparkling. "You were amazing in that role play," she said. "You owned your mistake, you apologized, you asked how she felt. That's exactly the kind of parent I want you to be." He laughed, a genuine, belly-deep sound. "I guess the practice is paying off." Months turned into a rhythm of shared growth. Mark continued his weekly shame log. His values board now included a new card, curiosity. He found himself asking more questions, listening more deeply, not just to Laura, but to coworkers, to strangers at the coffee shop, to the children he taught art on weekends. He began a habit of writing a short note each night to Laura, a gratitude note, something he had never done before. Some notes were simple. "Thank you for making dinner tonight." Others were deeper. "I'm grateful for your patience when I'm still learning." Laura responded in kind, leaving sticky notes on the fridge, on his laptop, on the bathroom mirror. Their home became a living tapestry of affirmations, a reminder that love is not a static state, but an ongoing practice. One spring morning, as the first crocuses pushed their heads through the melting snow, Mark received a call from Maya. "Hey," she said, excitement bubbling in her voice. "The doctor just told us we're having twins, a boy and a girl." The news hit him like a wave, both exhilarating and terrifying. He felt his heart pound, his breath catch. He imagined two tiny lives, the responsibility of being an uncle to two children, the possibility of someday being a father himself. He thought of the values he wanted to model, the habits he wanted to pass down. He thought of the shame that sometimes whispered that he didn't deserve this joy, that he might let them down. He called Laura back immediately. "We're having twins," he said, voice trembling with a mixture of awe and fear. I don't know what to say." Lara's voice was steady, warm. "That's wonderful, Mark. Twins. We'll be there for you, for them, for us. Let's sit down tonight and talk about what this means for all of us." That night, after the kids were asleep, they sat at the kitchen table, a soft lamp casting a gentle glow. They spread out a notebook, the same one Mark used for a shame log, and began to map out their thoughts. "What are we most excited about?" Laura asked. "Family," Mark said. "Seeing them grow, being part of that." "What scares us?" Laura pressed. "The possibility of repeating old patterns," Mark admitted. "The fear that I'll slip back into old habits, that I'll let my shame take over." Laura reached across the table, taking his hand. "We've built tools for that. We have the log, the check-ins, the values board, the kindness nights. We can extend those tools to the twins. We can be intentional." They wrote down concrete actions, attending prenatal classes together, reading books on child development, setting up a weekly family circle where everyone, partners, kids, relatives, could share feelings. They decided to incorporate the twins into their community garden project, planting a small patch of sunflowers in honor of the new lives. They planned to write letters to the twins, just as Mark had done for his niece, describing the values they hoped to nurture. In the weeks that followed, the anticipation of the twins' arrival wove itself into the fabric of their daily life. Mark found himself more present during his work calls, more attentive to Lara's needs, more mindful of the tone of his voice. He practiced mindfulness meditation each morning, a habit he had started months earlier, focusing on his breath, noticing thoughts without judgment. He added a new entry in his shame log. Seeing a pregnancy announcement, 7 out of 10, felt a surge of fear and excitement. Wrote a gratitude note to Laura instead of spiraling. The rating was high, but the response was healthier. The day the twins were born, a crisp autumn dawn painted the sky in shades of peach and lavender. Mark arrived at the hospital before Laura, pacing the hallway, his heart a rapid drumbeat. When Laura emerged, carrying 2 tiny bundles swaddled in soft blue and pink blankets, his breath caught. He knelt, eyes brimming with tears, and whispered, "Welcome, my little ones." He felt an overwhelming surge of love that eclipsed the lingering shame, a love so pure it seemed to wash away the remnants of his past mistakes. The first weeks were a blur of feeding schedules, diaper changes, sleepless nights. Mark held each baby in his arms, feeling the weight of them, the fragility, the trust they placed in him without any knowledge of his past. He whispered promises to them, promises to be present, to listen, to model honesty. He fell into a rhythm, changing diapers while humming the lullaby he'd once played for his niece, reading bedtime stories to both babies simultaneously, his voice soft and steady. Laura watched him, her eyes softening each time he looked at the twins with awe. "You're a natural," she said one night as they sat on the porch, the cool air carrying the scent of pine. "You're already doing the things we talked about, being present, being honest, being gentle." Mark smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "I think the twins are teaching me as much as I'm teaching them." Their lives had become a tapestry of small, intentional moments. The kindness nights continued, now often featuring the twins' tiny cooing in the background. The community garden flourished, the sunflowers they'd planted for the twins growing tall, bright, resilient. The values board on the kitchen wall now included a new card, "Family," added after the twins arrived, a reminder of the centrality of their bond. One summer afternoon, the twins, now toddling with chubby legs and bright eyes, joined Mark and Laura at the garden. Mark knelt in the soil, his fingers muddy, showing the toddlers how to gently pat down the earth around a young tomato plant. He spoke softly. "Plants need care just like people. We have to water them, give them sunlight, and be patient." The children giggled, their tiny hands mimicking his motions, their faces lit with curiosity. Laura watched from the porch swing, her heart full. "You've come a long way," she whispered to herself, feeling gratitude for the man sitting before her, for the man who had once been lost in shame and now was building something beautiful. Mark's shame log entries continued to evolve. The intensity scores gradually fell, the triggers became less frequent, and the responses shifted from avoidance to engagement. He added new columns, action taken and outcome. One entry read, "Saw a friend post about cheater jokes, 6 out of 10, paused, breathed, wrote in log, then called Laura to talk about it." Outcome, felt supported, shame dissipated faster. Another entry, "Twins crying at night, 8 out of 10, felt overwhelmed, practiced deep breathing, asked Laura for help. We took turns soothing them." Outcome, bond strengthened, shame transformed into empathy. Dr. Larkin noted the progress in their sessions, praising the consistent use of tools. She introduced a new concept, post-traumatic growth, the idea that individuals can develop new strengths, deeper appreciation for life, and a richer sense of purpose after a crisis. She encouraged Mark to reflect on the ways his betrayal had inadvertently opened doors to empathy, compassion, and community involvement that he might never have discovered otherwise. Sometimes the hardest experiences become the soil for our most meaningful growth, she said gently. Your story isn't just about pain. It's about the way you've chosen to turn that pain into something that benefits not only you, but the people around you. Mark took her words to heart. He began to write a short essay for a local newspaper about his journey, hoping that sharing his vulnerability might help others who were wrestling with shame. He titled it "From Broken Trust to Shared Growth," and in it he described the practical tools he'd used: shame logs, values boards, weekly check-ins, community service, offering a roadmap for anyone seeking to rebuild after betrayal. The piece was published, and the response was overwhelming. Letters poured in from people who had faced infidelity, from spouses who felt lost, from friends who wanted to support loved ones. Mark felt humbled, realizing that his personal work had rippled outward, creating a network of empathy. One evening, after a particularly long day at the community center where he taught an art class for kids, Mark returned home to find Laura sitting on the couch, the twins asleep in their bassinets, a soft blanket draped over her shoulders. She held a folded piece of paper in her hand, her eyes bright. "I got an invitation," she said, handing him the paper. "It's a retreat for couples, renewal and resilience. It's 3 days out in the mountains. They focus on mindfulness, communication, and building a shared vision for the future. I think it could be good for us." Mark read the invitation, feeling a flutter of anticipation. "I'd love that," he said, his voice steady. "It feels like the next step, taking what we've built and deepening it." They booked the retreat for the following month, arranging care for the twins with their grandparents, whose faces lit up at the prospect of spending time with their great-nieces. The weekend arrived, and Mark and Laura drove up the winding mountain road, the air cooling, the pine scent growing stronger with each turn. The retreat center was a rustic lodge perched on a ridge, its wooden beams warm, its windows framing a sweeping view of valleys below. The first day began with a guided meditation, the instructor's voice soft, encouraging participants to breathe in the present, to release the past without judgment. Mark felt his mind wander to the night he sent that trembling text, to the moment he opened his shame log, to the countless evenings spent in therapy. He let those images pass, observing them like clouds drifting across a sky he was learning to clear. After meditation came a workshop on authentic communication. Couples sat in circles, each taking turns speaking without interruption, using I statements, listening fully. Mark found himself speaking with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. "I still feel a lingering fear that I'll betray the trust we've rebuilt," he said, his voice steady. "When that fear rises, I notice my body tense, my thoughts spiral. I try to breathe, to write it down, but sometimes I need a reminder that I'm not defined by my past." Laura nodded, her eyes shining. "I hear you," she replied, "and I want you to know that I see the effort you put in each day. I also have my own fears of being hurt again, of losing myself and trying to fix everything. I'm learning to ask for help when I need it, instead of bottling it up." The facilitator smiled, noting the honesty. "This is the work of rebuilding," she said. "It's not about erasing the past. It's about weaving it into a new, stronger fabric." The next day, they participated in a nature walk, each step a metaphor for moving forward. The guide asked them to collect a small stone that represented something they wanted to let go of. Mark chose a smooth, dark stone, feeling its cool weight in his hand. He thought of the shame that had once felt like a heavy chain. He placed the stone in a shallow stream, watching it sink, feeling a quiet release. Laura collected a bright, speckled stone, thinking of the fear of losing herself. She held it close, then tucked it into her pocket, deciding to keep it as a reminder of her own resilience. Evenings were spent around a fire pit, sharing stories, roasting marshmallows, and looking up at a sky so clear it seemed endless. Mark and Laura lay side by side, their hands intertwined, the twins' pictures from home tucked into their backpacks as a reminder of why they were there. Mark whispered, "I'm grateful for this time, for the chance to step back and see how far we've come." Laura leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm grateful for you, for your willingness to keep learning." When the retreat ended, they drove back down the mountain, the car filled with a renewed sense of purpose. They returned home to find the twins giggling in their playpen, the scent of fresh laundry filling the air. In the weeks that followed, the lessons from the retreat seeped into everyday life. They instituted a nightly gratitude circle before bed, each sharing 3 things they appreciated about the day. They set a weekly no-screen evening where phones were tucked away and they played board games, read stories, or simply talked. They made a habit of taking a short walk together after dinner, the fresh air clearing any lingering tension. Mark's shame log continued to be a faithful companion. One entry read, "Spotted a news article about a celebrity's infidelity. 5 out of 10. Felt a flash of old shame. Paused, breathed, wrote in log, then texted Laura, feeling triggered, let's talk." Outcome: shared feeling, felt supported, shame reduced. Another entry: twins were fighting over a toy. 6 out of 10. Felt my own inner child want to intervene harshly. Remembered mindfulness, stepped back, guided them to share, used I feel language. Outcome. They resolved. I felt proud of my response. He also started a new habit, writing a short letter to the future each month, addressed to his future self, his future children, his future partner. In these letters, he reflected on the lessons he'd learned, the values he'd cultivated, the hopes he held. He stored them in a wooden box beside the values board, a physical archive of his evolving identity. Laura, too, kept a journal, but hers was focused on moments of self-compassion. She wrote about the times she felt herself slipping into self-blame, about the time she allowed herself to feel joy despite the lingering pain. Their journals sometimes intersected. Sometimes they would read each other's entries aloud, a ritual that deepened their intimacy. Their kindness nights grew in scope. They invited a local veterans group 1 month, sharing a potluck and listening to stories of service and sacrifice. They organized a fundraiser for a shelter, cooking meals, and collecting donations. They partnered with a nearby school to start a mentorship program where high school seniors could spend afternoons with the twins, teaching them simple crafts. Each event reinforced their belief that healing was not only personal, but communal. One crisp winter evening, as snow fell gently outside, Mark and Laura sat by the fireplace, the twins fast asleep in their cribs. Mark pulled out his notebook, the one he used for a shame log, and turned to a fresh page. He wrote, "Today I felt a deep sense of peace watching the twins sleep. The weight of my past is still there, but it no longer feels like a chain. It feels like a reminder of how far I've traveled." He scored the intensity of any lingering shame at a 2, noting that the feeling was fleeting, almost imperceptible. Laura reached over, placing her hand lightly on his. "You become so steady," she said quietly. "I see the man you are now, not the one who made the mistake." He smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "I couldn't have done it without you." She squeezed his hand. "And I couldn't have done it without you. We're both learning." The next morning, they took the twins to a nearby lake for a family outing. The water was glassy, reflecting the pale blue sky. Mark held one of the babies in his arms while Laura pushed a small wooden boat along the shore. The twins, now a bit older, clapped their hands, delighted by the ripples. Mark felt a sense of awe at the simple beauty of the moment, at the way life continued to offer new beginnings. In the years that followed, Mark's journey became a tapestry woven with threads of accountability, humility, love, and community. He never forgot the night he sent that trembling text, nor the shame that followed. He never ignored the moments when the past tried to assert itself. Instead, he met those moments with tools, a journal, a values board, a supportive partner, a therapist who guided him, a community that embraced him. He learned that forgiveness is not a destination, but a process, a daily decision to choose honesty over avoidance, to choose growth over stagnation. Now, as the sun set behind the hills, casting a golden hue over the garden where the tomatoes were ripe and the sunflowers stood tall, Mark stood with Laura hand in hand, the twins toddling around their feet. He felt the cool breeze brush his cheek, heard the distant laughter of neighbors at a nearby barbecue, smelled the earthy scent of soil. He looked at the values board, the card for family, glowing softly in the lantern light, and felt a deep, steady gratitude. He thought of the shame log, the letters to his niece, the kindness nights, the retreat in the mountains, the community garden, the countless small choices that had added up. He thought of the shadow that still lingered, a faint outline that reminded him of his missteps, but also of his capacity to change. He turned to Laura, her eyes reflecting the amber sky, and whispered, "I'm still learning. I'm still forgiving. And that's enough." She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. Together, she said, and as the night deepened, the stars emerging one by one, Mark felt a quiet certainty settle over him. The road ahead would still have twists, still have potholes, still have moments when shame tried to whisper its old song. But he now carried with him a toolbox of honesty, humility, daily intention, and a partner who believed in his capacity to keep choosing better. The journey was unending, but it was no longer a prison. It was a path illuminated by the light he and Laura had built together, a light that would guide them, their twins, and the many lives they touched for years to come. The years slipped by in a rhythm that felt both inevitable and miraculous. The twins, now named Maya and Noah, grew taller with each passing season, their laughter filling the house like wind chimes on a breezy porch. Their first steps were taken on the same garden path where Mark had once knelt, mud staining his boots as he showed them how to coax a seedling from the earth. Their first words were simple: Mom, Dad, Uncle, each syllable a reminder that the language of love could be rebuilt, one syllable at a time. On a bright Saturday in late summer, the family gathered for a small celebration in the garden. The tomatoes were heavy on the vine. The sunflowers swayed like golden sentinels, and a wooden table was set with a modest spread of homemade bread, fresh salad, and Maya's favorite lemon cake. Laura moved between the guests, her smile steady, her eyes catching Mark's in a glance that needed no words. Mark felt the familiar thrum of his heart, but this time it was a calm beat, a pulse that matched the steady rustle of leaves overhead. After the meal, the children ran to the old oak tree at the edge of the garden, their small hands gripping the low branches. Mark and Laura followed, sitting on the grass, the earth cool beneath them. He pulled his journal from his pocket, the leather cover softened by years of use, and opened to a page he hadn't turned in months. The entry read, "Today I watched my children play under the same sky that once held my greatest shame. The shadow is still there, a faint outline at the edge of my vision, but it no longer grips my breath. I am grateful for the tools that turned a broken promise into a daily practice of honesty, for the partner who chose to stay, for the community that reminded me I am not alone. The road ahead will always have bends, but I walk it with eyes open, hands willing, and a heart that remembers both the hurt and the healing." He closed the journal, feeling the weight of the words settle like a stone placed gently in a stream. Maya looked up, eyes bright, and asked, "Uncle Mark, why do you write in that book?" He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Because writing helps me see where I've been and where I'm going. It's a way to remember that even when things feel dark, there's always a way to bring light back." Laura reached over, laying her hand on his. "And you've shown us all how to keep that light burning," she said softly. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. As the last light faded, the family rose together, hands linked, and walked back toward the house. The twins toddled ahead, their small feet pattering on the path, their voices bubbling with excitement for the next adventure. Mark felt the familiar rhythm of his own steps, steady and sure, each footfall a quiet affirmation that the journey was still moving forward. Later that evening, after the children were tucked into bed, Mark and Laura sat on the back porch, a blanket draped over their knees, the night air crisp and scented with jasmine. A firefly danced briefly over the grass, its glow fleeting but unmistakable. "It's strange," Laura said, looking up at the stars, "how something that once felt like the end of everything turned into a new beginning we never imagined." Mark nodded, his gaze fixed on the constellations. "I used to think forgiveness was a destination, a finish line I could cross and be done with. Now I see it as a compass, always pointing me back to the values we chose together. It doesn't erase the past. It just gives us a way to carry it without letting it steer us. She turned her head, her forehead resting against his. We've built a life that honors that compass. We've taught Maya and Noah that it's okay to make mistakes, as long as we own them and keep trying. And we've shown each other that love isn't a static feeling. It's a series of choices we make every day. Mark pressed a kiss to the top of her head, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his cheek. "I'm still learning," he whispered, "still forgiving, still choosing. And that's enough, because it means we're still moving." The night deepened, the sky a canvas of infinite points, each one a promise of possibility. In the quiet, Mark felt a profound gratitude settle within him, a warmth that radiated from his chest to his fingertips. He thought of the blinking cursor that had started it all, the shame that had once seemed unbreakable, the therapist who had handed him a journal, the values board that now hung as a quiet testament on the wall, the countless kindness nights that had woven strangers into a community, and the small acts of daily honesty that had become the foundation of his marriage. He realized that the story he had been living was never truly finished. It was a series of chapters, each written with intention, each bearing the marks of both light and shadow. And as long as he and Laura continued to turn the pages together, hand in hand, the narrative would keep unfolding, richer and more resilient with every line. The fireflies faded, the porch lights flickered on, and the house glowed softly behind them. Mark stood, stretching his arms, feeling the cool night air brush his skin. He took one last look at the sky, inhaled deeply, and let the breath out slowly, a silent acknowledgement of every step taken and every step still to come. With Laura beside him, he walked toward the house, the door opening to reveal the gentle breathing of his sleeping children, the faint rustle of blankets, the quiet hum of a home built on repaired trust. He paused at the threshold, feeling the weight of the moment, and whispered to the night, "I am here. I am learning. I am enough." The door closed softly behind him, sealing in the promise of another day, another chance to choose, to love, to grow. The story continued, not as a finished tale, but as a living, breathing testament to the power of humility, accountability, and the unwavering resolve to turn a fractured past into a